Yes. Yes, you would basically hang over the fire and you would be burned with a fag of wood. That's the term fag.
That's what you had, yeah.
What age?
Because you were a heretic.
Catholic universally
Yes,
existed?
it was the church. It was the church in Europe. It was the only church.
In Europe during what time?
During the Middle Ages, from 200 all the way through 1500. Okay, so we'll have to put 200 to about 1500. Okay.
This is 80.
Yes. Okay, and then something happened. Something happened. It's called the Renaissance. Actually, you know what? Let's go back even further. You had something else happen. You had the scientific revolution. Wait a minute. Is that
Darwin?
Sorry.
Is that when Darwin came in?
Pardon me?
Scientific revolution?
That's later. But so the Renaissance comes along, and it harkens back to glory days of ancient Rome, ancient Greece, where actually people were smart and learned stuff. And the problem with the Middle Ages is that most people were stupid. And yeah, nobody read anything except for the clergy who had to learn so they could transpose the Bible. And
didn't you say something how like the church would collect profits from all of its citizens, and then later they were able to read and they said, no, look, the Bible doesn't say anything about giving.
Right, and the only people that were allowed to interpret Scripture were the church and the priests, and you just you were just to accept whatever the priest said about church affairs. So, but the Renaissance comes along, and it's a new way of looking at things. It's a new way of looking at life, and it values human intellect. It values knowledge. It looks down on ignorance. It looks up on understanding the world around you. I mean, you just look at Renaissance art. You look at, what does it look like? It's natural. It goes back to Greek and Roman ideals of, if you look at the paintings, they're usually done in the nude. Why? Because they like the human form. If you look at medieval art, it's all weird, and it doesn't have any form. It doesn't look at the muscles. But if you look at Renaissance art, it's got perspective, right? You can see things, in a distance. It's actually painted with perspective. You look at the muscles of. If you look at a Christ figure during the Renaissance, it's done with muscles. If you look at any art during the Renaissance, it's done with looking at a form of the human body that's natural, because that's what's right. So the Renaissance is this looking back at the classical forms and saying this is the best way of doing things. So looking back at classical work, you have to look back at the Bible. And by doing that, you understand the original intent. So you have to read, you have to understand, you have to look at Greek, you have to look at Hebrew, and you have to read the Bible. And by doing that, many Catholic monks, one of them being Martin Luther, who was a child of the Renaissance, okay, he comes out of the Renaissance.
What time period was the Renaissance?
The Renaissance begins in the late 1400s, and it continued until about 1620.
That makes up all these dates.
Okay, yeah, so that's no big deal. Just get a time frame. So the Renaissance goes on. What it does, it reignites people's passion for understanding. They just want to know. And so Martin Luther wants to know. So he goes back in the Bible, he reads the Bible, and he says, there's no such thing as Pope in the Bible. Where does it say Pope? No such thing. And he says, oh, I have a right to go directly to God. If I'm a believer in Christ, I go directly to God. I don't have to go to the priest. I don't have to ask forgiveness from the priest. And so all these different ideas, based upon the Renaissance. So the Renaissance leads to something called the Reformation. And the Reformation begins in 1500s and it goes all the way to 1648. The Reformation comes out of the Renaissance. It's looking back at the classical works, looking back at the Bible and saying, look, Martin Luther says, according to the Bible, I can go directly to God. I don't have to go to the Catholic Church. I don't have to pay money. I don't have to do any of these outward signs. I simply have to have faith in God. And my faith takes me directly to God. And I can go to heaven when I die. And in the meantime, I can live a life worthy of good deeds and my faith. So that's an outward style of faith. It's not an inward style of faith that was basically experienced during the medieval times. Very different. So out of Martin Luther comes the Lutheran Church. Okay? And out of the Lutheran Church, comes a lot of different splinter church. You got Calvinists. John Calvin basically takes his ideas from Luther and splits off and creates his own church.
What's the difference in his beliefs?
Okay, Luther is more like the Catholic belief.
Real quick, is this all important? Is this going to be in the AP test, like all the religions?
Well, you're going to have to understand it to understand where we get to this next step, which is the there's two of them. There's the Puritans.
And the separatists?
Yep, and the Separatists.
Okay.
Puritans wanted to create like a purity.
Yes, they wanted, but the Separatists wanted to break off. Now, the difference between Calvin and Luther are this. The Lutheran belief is a lot more liberal. It looks more like Catholic belief, but you just remove the priesthood and you remove the Pope, and you've got salvation by faith. You've got, but a lot of the church, how they express their faith is the same as the Catholic Church, but they break off. It's a break off.
So is Calvinism like more restrictive?
Yeah, it's more conservative. It's more based upon biblical truth. Okay, it takes the ideas of Luther and takes it a step higher, because the Puritans are even more.
But if anything, they have more. I can't say like more government, but like they have more like restrict, like a higher power kind of restricting them. Or like this is. If we were to compare this to like state and federal government, Lutheran would be more like the state sort of.
Yeah, yeah.
And Calvinism would be more like the federal government.
Or even more so.
Like
even more
dictatorship.
breaking. Yeah. So Calvin believed that in order to be able to express your faith, you had to have separation between the church and the state. Whereas with Luther, it didn't matter to him. To him, as a matter of fact, in 1648,
Wait, where is separation of church and state?
Calvin is a big advocate of.
So either you're with us or you're going to hell.
Well, not necessarily, but it means that you can't have a government that is.
Oh, so the government is run by the church.
Right.
Kind of like.
You don't want the government. You don't want the
Oh,
government
maybe not
and the
the
church to
church.
be one, because that's what you had back here. Back here you had the government and the church as one. Yes, they were. But they became, well,
Crazy.
we'll talk about that later. But, so the Catholic Church was doing everything and people didn't like it, so they wanted to do their own thing, so they created the Lutheran Church. in 1648, there was something called the Treaty of Westphalia. There was like a 100-year war between Lutherans and Catholics, and finally it came to an end in 1648. And when the treaty said, okay, we're going to set up Catholic, we're going to set up Catholic Spain, we're going to set up Catholic France, and then we've got Protestant England, we've got Protestant Germany, okay? Then each one of those states was its own religion.
Oh, so it separated the countries.
Yeah, but it didn't separate the state from the religion. So what Calvin said is you have to separate.
What was the name of the war?
It was they
You
were called the religious wars. You don't have to know the religion, but you have to know the fact that as a result of those came a belief in Calvin that was filtered down into the two groups that come after him. Calvin basically believes that there should be separation between the church and state. That the state should not have a monopoly on what you believe. And where does that end up? That's us, right? Isn't it?
Democracy.
Yeah. So even though Calvinism ends up in Puritanism that you really don't like, but they are a strain of individualism that allows for freedom of religion.
Wait, they were. Oh, because that's why they came to the New World, because they wanted freedom.
Yeah.
But then again, they went to the New World and then started going, hey,
Ha!
now you guys have to be
Yeah,
our religion.
hypocrites!
And then it just kind of all collapsed from there, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, the biblical Commonwealth, remember the Bible Commonwealth that they set up in Massachusetts? And then there could be no dissent,
And then
right?
later in like Rhode Island, there was freedom of religion. too.
And then you had Roger Williams who
Williams.
dissented, and then you had that woman, what's her name?
Wait, don't tell me.
Okay. She's important.
She had 9 children and they all died.
Yes, she
right?
did.
I remember that, but I can't remember her name.
No, it's not in the Crucible, but
9 children,
some-
they all died, and she was attacked by Native Americans, right?
yes, she was.
And I don't remember her name. What's her name?
What's her name?
Anne
Anne
Hutchinson.
Yeah.
That
Anne
was in the-
Hutchinson, yes. And so Anne, yes. Well, she descended from the Puritans. So all these basically they set up their kind of structure, and they say, oh yes, freedom, but our freedom. And then somebody says, but wait, what about this? And then they say, no, no freedom, our freedom. Our freedom from their freedom, but no freedom for you. So it trickles down to today, and then you've got some people who are really strict fundamentalists who believe that America was founded on only what principles? Christian principles. We are a Christian nation. Have we ever been a Christian nation? No, we've never been a Christian nation. And that's coming from somebody who's a Christian, okay? But I happen to be a historian, so, truth comes first, right? And the truth shall set you free, John, chapter 1. And what is the truth? The truth is that we've never been that, because we've always wanted separation. We've always wanted separation. In the final analysis, we like to have the state be secular, meaning that it is not a religious state. So when you hear these Bible-thumping fundamentalists saying that, well, we want to keep Sharia law out of the United States because we don't want them Muslims taking over, right? You hear this. I mean, you just Google Sharia law, and you've got a bunch of people that are thinking that our country is going to go to Sharia law, which is Muslim law, but it can't, because we have something called a constitution, and the constitution forbids the theocracy, and Sharia law is a theocracy. We cannot have a theocracy in this country. So that's where this comes from. That's why this is important. That's why these exist. These are all splinter groups, and they all keep splintering. And even today, they're even in the Protestant faith. You can take this down and take that down, and they go their separate ways, and they split. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing, all right?
So from the separatists, you get the pilgrims.
Yes, the Pilgrims.
They were pilgrims.
Yes, the Pilgrims were separatists, which were Calvinists, but they did not believe that you could purify the church. The Puritans wanted to stay in the church in England and purify it. But what happened was John,
Oh, so the Puritans wanted a separate church, but no.
no, they wanted to stay in England. They wanted to stay in England and purify the church, make it better.
And the separatists wanted a different
Separatists said,
church.
dunghill of abomination, time to go.
We have our own Puritan church.
We're going to start our own thing, and that's what they wanted to do. And, you know, the hypocrites that they were, they signed a contract and then didn't go by it.
All of it.
Which, you know, which going back to the Virginia company, they signed a contract with the Virginia company to settle on Virginia company
And then they
land.
went to Massachusetts.
And they deliberately settled in
Wait,
Massachusetts.
they
which was,
deliberately did it?
oh yeah, it was out,
Really?
yes,
I
it was
thought it was the whole like drifted thing.
They do
Elementary
this.
school is so bad with
Drifted.
education.
quote drifted. Whoops, we've drifted off course.
So roll back.
Must have been that grog.